Well, first of all, happy birthday, Giorgio. And secondly, welcome all of Giorgio, well, not all of Giorgio's friends, some of Giorgio's friends, and I'm sure that the other friends who are elsewhere in the world will be cheering internally at the same time. Let's give him another cheer. So the title that's been chosen, I think, is a great one, of Disordered Serendipity, and I don't know whether this is a problem for us all during the time. This sketch on the front, which is clearly related to Giorgio's replica symmetry breaking, but is different in many ways. I haven't worked it out yet. Perhaps you all know, but if you haven't and you're getting a bit bored or in the breaks, you might just think about it. And then, if I may also say one more thing before I pass the microphone over, serendipity has also been something which was deep in my own thoughts for the last several decades. You know, as you know, I suggested this simple model which I wrote about with Kirkpatrick, and we chose, I chose, just for simplicity, to use an Ising model because I thought that was the most simple. And as you also know, it ended up with a negative entropy at t equals 0, which was impossible. And I suspect this must have played some part in Giorgio's taking over this problem. Perhaps there are also other things. It's clear that his work on the replica symmetry breaking ideas and so on was the real cause of the explosion of interest, which has gone all over the scientific spectrum, and about which we're going to learn in these 3 days. So thank you, Giorgio. But now let's pass to one of those applications on statistical physics and the inference problem by Florent Zakaula. Do you have a microphone already?
I do. 1, 2, is it okay? Yes, thank you. All right, thank you, David, and thank you, Giorgio, and of course, where are you? Here. Happy birthday again. It's really a pleasure to be here. Okay, since it is, it's a conference, but since it is Giorgio's birthday, I was thinking back when I was here working as a postdoc in Rome in Giorgio's group 15 years ago, and nostalgia took me. So before I moved to the subject, I was looking at old pictures. And it's interesting how things have changed. So this is exactly La Sapienza. That was me. It kind of breaks my heart. I had hair at the time. Time passes. These days in La Sapienza are really important professionally, as you will see, and personally. Actually, I met my wife, and Lenka, who is also known for many of you here. That was the computer we had at the time. It was surprising for me that we had this huge, bulky computer. I think that was Drago. It was Andrea Spagnani computer. So it was a wonderful time. So when I was looking at these pictures, and I realized that there was a very influential conference basically the same year that we all gathered in Les Houches. I remember with Federico, we packed all our baggages in this car. I think we were like maybe 4 of us in this car. And we drove all the way to Les Houches. And looking at the picture, you can recognize many people, actually, including some of the organizers here. It's interesting how much, what was presented is still actual, and how much it, it shaped the research in the years. So that was Silvio presenting some work on the interpolation method to prove replica method. Here, Mark was presenting the cavity method on sparse graph. That was, of course, as we will see, very influential. And we have Giorgio here showing what happened with the complexity and the potential, and how you can compute the complexity by looking at the difference between the maximum and the minimum, and so on and so forth. So, interestingly, everything I will say is basically in those slides. So, when I say that this was very influential, this is no joke. All right, so, since this is the first talk, and since there are many problems on estimations, inference, learning, or whatever, they are buzzwords if you want, I thought I could give some kind of introductory lecture, and more than introductory, some kind of a reflection on how things evolved and the way we write things, the way we think about things, and how we change, at least in the last 15 years. Okay, so we are going to look to problems like these. So there is a generative model, okay? So there is a probability distribution, and you pick up an element from it, okay, X star. Okay, and this is what you want to know. Think about a vector in Rn. Now, you are not given X star. Instead, there is a probabilistic process. You know, it can be complicated. And you observe Y, which is a result of a probabilistic process, and Y is conditioned on X star. And the question is, okay, can you find back X star, or can you find a good estimator for X star? And of course, if you think 2 minutes, it's obvious that a huge amount of problem can be mapped into this, right? For instance, well, this is a generative model that represents a world of all nice images. And this is, I don't know what a camera does, so you have a blur images, and you want to deblur. So it's mesh denoising. Okay, you can think this is an image of your brain, and this is what you observe with MRI, and you want to go from the MRI measurement to the brain. Or you can think this is a category. Okay, it's like cats and dog, and what you are given now from a complicated, extremely complicated probabilistic model is a picture of a cat, and you want something that tells this is a cat or this is a dog. Okay, so huge amount of problem can be framed as statistical estimation problem. Now, there is a very long story in statistical physics of studying this problem. I don't know where it starts. Certainly 85 is a very important year, because we start to see some spin glass in there. These are actually 2 extremely influential papers. This one from colleagues in ESPCI, and of course this pioneering work by Daniel Amit and Sampolinsky and others. But I mean, and I'm saying there are a lot of papers, there are a lot of papers. If you start to look, you can go on, so on, and find a huge amount of paper, including by many of people in the audience and many of our friends. So what can we say new here, or not even new? Let's try to tell a story here and see how things have evolved. And so to do this, I will discuss a precise model, and it's a problem of random linear estimation. Right? Okay, so this is what the problem is about. So there is X, okay, or X star if you want. This is a true one. This is what you want. And you are not given X. What you are given is a random projection. So you have a matrix, which is M times N. Remember, X is in Rn. Right? So the matrix is a Gaussian IID matrix. So we all love Gaussian IID matrix, because then we can perform integration by part and Gaussian integration. So this is basically what we all do in spin glasses. So you are given Y plus some noise. Okay, you are given the random projection plus some noise, and your task is to find back X. So it looks like a toy problem, especially because of this assumption. It turns out it is, but it's still something that has many applications, including something called compressed sensing. The idea is that if you want to measure a vector like this, and it's sparse, and many elements are 0, you can actually do it from a very small y. And also in information theory, there is a problem called CDMA, which is essentially the same thing, but where X is binary. So it's not entirely something made up, okay? It's something which has application. All right, so what can we, how do you study that kind of problem? So the way you do this is to write Bayes formula, okay? You know the generative process. Let's assume you know it. In our case, well, Y is just AX plus Gaussian noise. You know P of X. For instance, you know that X is a random binary vector. So you just write what is P of X given Y. And then you write it in a form that looks nice. You have an Hamiltonian here, and you can start to write the kind of replica symmetry breaking or replica method that we like. Okay, so it turns out that the best way to solve this problem, in the sense to give a good estimation of X, is to choose X hat as the magnetization in the physics sense of X. All right? So you have to simulate your problem. So for instance, you have a very good Monte Carlo simulator. Now you compute the marginal probability of each variable, and you take the mean. Okay? So if these are plus or minus variable, binary variable, this is just the magnetization. Right? So it's a standard result that the magnetization is the best estimator, in the sense that it minimizes the square error that you can do with the truth. Now we know that computing magnetization for a statistical physics problem can be hard, right? I mean, you need to compute log z and everything, or you can make a very long simulation, but it's a hard problem. But at least maybe you can compute what the error will be, and to do this, of course, you have to apply the replica or the cavity method. Okay, so physicists enter the game. We try to compute that kind of object, the expectation of log z. That's what we call the free energy. We are very happy. And so people have done this. In fact, for this problem, we've done this with Mark in 2012, and we are really happy over our computation. But really, it was nothing but a variant of a very important work by Toshiyuki Tanaka on the CDMA. So he did it for plus or minus 1 variables, and we just repeat the computation for generic variables. It's very interesting, actually. So this work by Toshiyuki Tanaka was so influential in information theory that if you go to information theory conference, they often call the replica method the Tanaka formula. Okay? So I was saying, yeah, I use this method. Oh, you mean the Tanaka formula. Right? So it was really important. I met the people working on CDMA like Giuseppe Quere, Sergio Verdu, and they said when this guy came and he had this crazy method and he was giving the right answer, people were like, where does this come from? Okay, it had really a huge impact. And this is one of the papers we have to thank for the influence of the replica method in information theory. Now, if you write down the free energy, this is how it looks. Okay, this is taken from my paper with Mark and Lanka, and François Saucé and Sony Fan. So this is the minimum of this function, all right? Now, if I show this to people trained in spin glass, they are happy. Well, it's complicated, but we are used to this. Yeah, there's dz. You know that this is a Gaussian, right? And you have an integral of a log of something. Well, it's nothing you have not seen billions of times. Okay. Now, what is interesting is that talking with people in information theory, we know to rewrite this formula in a much more compact way, and writing matters. Now, let me make an aparté. Okay, so what I wrote was this. By the way, if this is base formula, you realize that the z is just p of y. Okay? So the normalization constant here is just the probability to observe a given value of y. Now, instead of working, so first comment is that minus log of z is the same as minus log of p of y, but since this expectation is over y, what we call the free energy is actually the entropy of the observation, which is interesting. For estimation problem, the average free energy is just the entropy of the observation. Okay? Now, what is even more interesting is that what people are really interested in information theory is the mutual information between x, what you want to know, and y, what you are given. This is a definition. With a bit of work, you can see that this is nothing but h of y minus the conditional entropy of y given x. And this is actually a trivial factor. Okay? Since y is just the random projection of x plus a Gaussian, this is the entropy of a Gaussian. It's 1/2 log of 2 pi delta. So instead of working with the free energy, you can rewrite everything in terms of mutual information. This is the same up to some trivial factor. So why is this interesting? Who cares? It's interesting because when you open a book and when you look, the same formula I've written in the context of information theory, and especially, for instance, this work, Guo, Verdu, and Tulina, Quere, Verdu, and Shamai, this is exactly the same formula. Okay? Now, a physicist will be particularly happy. What is this high? How come the formula is so simple? There are no integral. But you have to admit it's pretty neat, all right? So what is it? Well, we still have a function with e and delta. You have to minimize on e, and when you minimize, e is actually, the minimizer is actually the true mean square error in the problem. And this thing here is a mutual information on a much simpler problem. It's a mutual information if you are given one scalar variable and you observe the same scalar variable plus some Gaussian noise. Okay? So of course you can rewrite this as an integral. It's trivial, but it's kind of cute to write it this way. Okay? Now, is it just that it is cute? In fact, just writing it this way gives you new ideas, and in particular, it helps us to do the following, which is my first contribution here, to prove this formula. Okay, so these are actually result that we obtained 2 years ago and that were also obtained by Rive and Pfister. So the theorem is that the actual mutual information is the minimum over this replica variable E of the replica symmetric formula given by this expression. Okay, so we proved the replica formula, and the minimizer is actually the minimal mean square error. Now, there are two kinds of reaction when I show this. I mean, many physicists will, why did you prove it? Okay? Do you even doubt the replica method? And of course I don't, but not everyone is like us, all right? Now the point is, in physics, we are doing experiment. You're making something, then you go and someone making the experiment. Here, this is a field of people doing math and doing applied math. You cannot complain that they want theorem. This is what they want. So it's important that we can give them. And what is interesting is not only we gave them, but we gave them with physics method. Okay, so I will go very fast on the proof ID because it's never a good idea to show a proof. So the point is the following. This part, as I told you, is the mutual entropy or information, whatever, of a scalar denoising problem, right? You have X star, and you just observe X star, well, rescaled plus a Gaussian noise. You know how to write this problem. Okay, that's exactly that. So this is easy. It's a one-dimensional integral. Right? So how hard is it to add this? Turns out it's not so hard. And as I told you, in fact, I learned how to do this in Rome because the way how to prove this was invented in Rome by Francesco Guerra and Antoninelli. And it's called the interpolation method. What you do is to write an Hamiltonian that depends on time, and you write it in a combination of the denoising problem which you know to solve, and this compressed sensing one, and then you have some interpolation that depends on time, and you write this interpolation path in a way such that at t equals 0, you start with a problem that you know. At t equals 1, you have the problem that you want. And then you write this simple integration, right? The problem at t equals 1 is the problem at t equals 0 plus the integration of the change. Okay, and then you have to work hard to compute this and to show this is what it is. And the reason why we can do it in this case, and that's the last thing I will say about the proof, is because for estimation problem, we have two crucial ingredients that simplify everything with respect to what we have in replica theory. The first one is called the Nishimori identity. In fact, it's a sample application of Bayes' theorem. And what it says is basically the ground truth X star is exchangeable with an equilibrium configuration. Okay, so this is a technical statement. What it means for physicists is this. Right? When you have M, which is the overlap with the truth, is the same as Q, the overlap between two equilibrium copies. So of course that simplifies a lot everything. And what is also very important for this problem, and that makes everything simple, is the concentration of overlaps. In the sense that we know that overlaps is concentrated. We know that P of Q is a delta. And of course, if we know that everything is replica symmetric, it helps. It's very interesting the way the second ingredient is proven. It's called the pinning lemma. It's actually the first, there was a seminal paper by Andrea in 2008. And the idea is that you say, well, I will freeze part of the system, a fraction epsilon of the system, into X star, into the truth. Okay? And then we know that the problem is replica symmetric in this case. And if you think 2 minutes, this is exactly what you guys do when you study glasses, when you are actually pinning particle and trying to see there is a first order transition in that case. Okay, it's a very similar technique. And what you show is that everything is continuous with a fraction of pinned particle. All right, so combining these two ingredients with the Guerra-Antoninelli interpolation, we can prove this formula. And then we have the replica method. Then we have the replica formula. We can minimize it. And we know what is the best mean square error we can get in this problem. Actually, this is how it looks. For instance, this is a problem if your signal that you want to measure is sparse. Only 30% of components are non-zero. So this is the ratio between M, the number of measurements, and the size of the signal. Here you have the noise. Okay, it's more noise here. Actually, in this unit, this is the signal-to-noise ratio. And this is how the MMSE looks. Okay, this is bad. This is a large MMSE. That means the mean square error is bad. The best reconstruction here gives you a bad error. And then in this region, okay, at low noise and large amount of measurement, you have basically a zero error. Okay, you have this sharp first-order transition, which is known as noise sensitivity here. So this is remarkable because now we can prove this is all rigorous. Okay. Now, the thing is, one thing that changed with respect to the way we were doing things 15 years ago is that these days people care more about algorithm. Right? It's very nice to know what is the best thing, but how do you get it? Right? We live in the age of algorithm. And the question is now, okay, how do you find it in practice? How do you find it efficiently? And by this, I mean in polynomial time. You know, exponentially, I know. I mean, I will run a very long simulation. It will work. Now, we have some tool in physics to do this. And since we are reminded the fantastic work of David on the Sherrington-Kirkpatrick model, we know that if we want to look at the marginal of the Sherrington-Kirkpatrick model, and remember, we want to know the marginal, we have the TAP equation. Okay? And these are sort of improvement field equations for spin glasses, which are called, they are called TAP due to Thouless, Anderson, and Palmer. So why not trying TAP? So everyone knows that this is a bad idea, that TAP equations are terrible. If you try to write it this way, in an iterative process, and you try to make them converge, it's terrible. It doesn't work for SK. Okay? It doesn't even work at high temperature and high field, deep in the paramagnetic phase. Right? So this is really annoying because we know these equations are good. In fact, this is what we do all the time. We count the number of solutions. When I was in Rome, actually, you are not a cool kid if you are not computing the number of solutions. I remember that on Monday it was exponential, on Tuesday it was polynomial, and then it was supersymmetry, then it was supersymmetry broken. It was a big thing at the time. Point is, it was actually hard to find some of them. So there was a very interesting contribution from Erwin Bolthausen, who was a mathematician working on this field, and he made a huge change. So can you see the change? Okay, that was here. All right, I will make it jiggle. All right, put a t-1 here. And then he proved that these equations converge everywhere in the paramagnetic phase. Right, and then the non-convergence was actually the mark of the AT line. Right, so it's actually very interesting that a trivial change like this has such an impact, but it does. It's actually easy to make sense of this if you start from belief propagation to derive TAP. All right, but this is for SK. What about linear estimation? So again, our Japanese colleague looked at the problem. There was a fantastic paper by Yoshiyuki Kabashima with somewhere here. And that was again in the context of CDMA, and he basically wrote the TAP equation, and they were working fine, except again, the convergence was not very good, and in fact, he wrote it in the paper. And for a while, people were using instead belief propagation that was converging better. But now we know how to make TAP works, and the modern version of TAP here is called approximate message passing, and it's due to the seminal work of Andrea, who I just saw arrived. It's there, with David Donoho and Ariane Malecki. And I wrote it in my notation. So Andrea's notation is much nicer, but I like mine better for some reason. But you see, it's not so bad. I mean, you have these estimators, this is a scalar, these are vectors. And essentially, you multiply a matrix. It doesn't look too bad. And the important thing is this A and V, which are the estimation of the magnetization and variance on one site. Okay? And just an iterative algorithm, and it works amazingly well. Actually, you can think of IMP as the modern avatar of TAP. And one of the reasons it had such a strong impact is because of another contribution of Andrea, which is that he proved the convergence, and it tells you how it converges. Right? For instance, for this problem, if you define the mean square error like this, so this is the estimate given for magnetization at each time. So you look at the error with the truth. Well, if you iterate your algorithm, this is what you have. Okay, so the error at t plus 1 is given by an expectation of this function. This function is nothing but the average of the prior times the Gaussian. And if you can just plot this. It's a one-dimensional integral, or two if you want, and it's easy. Now, what is remarkable is that you can show that this equation is nothing but the fixed point of the replica equation. Okay? So this is the kind of thing that we will write m is equal to the integral over a Gaussian measure of tangent hyperbolic of beta m in the SK model. This is just the replica fixed point. So IMP is probably just trying to maximize or minimize, depends what you are working with, the replicated free energy. And it's not only that this is telling you something about AMP, it also gives you another interpretation of the replica free energy. You can totally forget that it's related to an estimation problem. It's just a function, and you have an algorithm that's trying to optimize this function, okay? Irrespectively of this function having sense or not. In fact, this function has no meaning sometimes. We can do this, even though the problem is replica symmetry broken, you can still write AMP, and it still optimize the replica symmetric function, which is very interesting. And in fact, I think that Pier Francesco will discuss partly this. Now, of course, the fact that AMP is just optimizing the replica symmetric function tells you that you can compute when AMP works, in the sense that it actually finds the correct minima. It works. Well, it doesn't work if things look like this, right? If the overlap with the truth and the free energy looks like this, well, you start here, you will get stuck here. If you don't have a secondary minima, well, you will go here. So it's just the physics of first order transition. This is actually the same diagram that Giorgio plotted in Les Ouches 15 years ago, right? So now we know when AMP works. And if we come back to this diagram, we can plot the second line here, and we can see that AMP works here. And this region here, we know that if we have exponential time, we should be able to achieve a zero error, but we don't know how to do it. Okay? We don't have a good algorithm. And as far as we know, there are no good fast algorithms to do it. And actually a very important open question in computer science. Right, just to show you that it works, this is what happens, the lines are what happens if you iterate the replica equation. And these are simulations with a system of 5,000 variables. And this is very interesting. I don't think any of us was thinking in terms of this equation this way before, as you know, but just telling you what an algorithm does. Okay, it's a major change, right? And so the nice thing is now you can ask how hard is it to find the best estimate in this problem? And we see that, well, if you have a lot of data and low noise, it's easy. If you have less data and more noise, it's impossible. You have in this region where the MSE was high. And in the middle, you have this hard phase. And of course, we know this. I mean, this is the same kind of thing. Once I plot this function, it's clear that this is the physics of first order transition, right? So you have the easy phase where it's easy to find the solid, the impossible phase where the equilibrium is a liquid, and you have this phase where you are trapped in supercooled water in between, which corresponds to the hard phase here. Okay? And it turns out that we see this all the time, except, when you start to look closely, you will realize there are not only two transitions, there are more, there are very interesting stuff. And in fact, there will be a very nice talk by Guillaume that tells you how you can classify a large amount of the phenomenology in such problem later on. Okay, but the point is, we see this hard phase everywhere. That's one of the things that people have been doing over the last 15 years. So it in block model, matrix factorization, tensor factorization, Gaussian mixture clustering, in error correction and everything. So for all that, all polynomial algorithms fail in the hard phase. It's not only us. Okay, no one knows a good algorithm here, and in fact, you can conjecture that AMP or TAP is the best one. And Andrea has proven a weaker version of this conjecture, and it's remained to be seen how generic that could be. All right, let me move to the next topic. That was nice, but that was Gaussian random measurement. Okay, of course we are all happy with this. We love Gaussian random matrices, but when I go to speak with my colleague, they say, "Look, I don't care about Gaussian random matrices. I mean, these matrices are what my machine is, or these are my data. They are not random." Okay, so okay, I don't know how to do generic matrices, but maybe we can try to go beyond IID Gaussian. Right? So let's try to see if we can relax this. And it turns out you can, okay? You can, and it has been done for that kind of matrices. So these are still random matrices, but you can make the spectrum arbitrarily complicated. So you decompose A here as U sigma V transpose, like when you do SVD decomposition. And now U can be anything, okay? The eigenvalues here, or singular values, can be anything as well. But V has to be chosen randomly between the R ensemble. That means V has to be chosen as a random rotation matrix, independently of everything else. Okay? Now this is a much larger ensemble of random matrices that you can study here. And of course, this is much more interesting. Right? It turns out that our Japanese colleague worked on this problem, and there was this fantastic contribution again by Yoshiyuki. And he wrote the free energy, but he wrote it the physics way. This is again how it looks. Again, physicists are not afraid of this. Of course. How hard can it be? It's even replica symmetric, so Nothing big. Now this G here is a complicated function that I didn't even write of the spectrum. Okay, you can solve this, so there is no problem. Okay, but now let's think about the power of notation. All right. Now the same work. Okay, so our colleague in information theory read this. Okay, and this is what they came out with. But the same function, right? It's a mutual information between x and x with a noise. Okay, it's scalar denoising as before, plus an integral of the R transform of the matrix A transpose. Right? This is still replica that tells you this. Now this is nicer, and then you have a coupling term. Okay, this depends on R and E, and you have to find a min-max. By the way, if you look at this, it should be familiar for those of you who know spin glass. It's the kind of thing that we see in the seminal work of Giorgio and Mark Potters in '95 when they look at the spin glass Sherrington-Kirkpatrick, where matrices of that form. All right, so we tried to prove this. We didn't make it. We proved the weaker version. You know, we can do U sigma V transpose W. Okay, we had to add the Gaussian matrices. We are trying hard to remove it. But otherwise, we actually proved the formula. And this is already a large ensemble of matrices. It's much more powerful. How did we prove this? Again, it's the power of notation is coming handy here. The first part here, we know what it is. I told you, oh, well, it's an estimation problem of something plus a Gaussian noise. The second one here, if you look it in the eyes, it's actually not so hard to see what it is. It's a problem in which you have a Gaussian vector, and you observe the random projection plus some noise. Actually, when everything is Gaussian here, it's very easy to solve this, and it gives you that. Okay? And when I say very easy, it's more than very easy. This is actually something that we all know. It's just a spherical SK model. Okay? This is actually a spherical SK model. Now, how do you get the last part? Well, you interpolate again. At t equals 0, these two problems, then you write a path that gets rid of them, and at t equal 1, you arrive here. And this is how we proved that. Okay, so we can repeat this analysis, and now we have this formula for much more generic matrices. Now, can we do the same with message passing? Okay, and again, look at history. Physicists have done this, especially, again, as I said, Giorgio and Mark. They wrote the tap equation for an ensemble that was much more involved. Okay, I would like to say more about it, but I won't, because Andrea Pagnani is discussing this method later on. In fact, it turns out that you can do the same for a linear estimation problem. And there is this very nice paper called Vector Approximate Message Passing that came out 2 years ago by my colleague Rangan Schnitter and Alison Fletcher. And they actually did this. And what they did they generalized everything that we have to this problem. And it's very nice. It's a very powerful algorithm. And what is interesting is that this is really an adaptation of something that were done by physicists before called expectation propagation. Right? And I think Andrea will discuss this just after me. So I just want to say that it works very well. Okay, so this is I want to advertise a work I published yesterday. So that appeared on Archive. And we are using that kind of algorithm to solve a sample problem. So we are using some neuroimaging problem. You have patients, you show them a face, and then you monitor the activity of the brain, and then you try to see which zone of the brain is reacting to faces, to house, and everything. And we had very good result. And what's interesting is the time. Okay, these are the state-of-the-art algorithm. This is the time they need to minimize an objective function, and the blue line is given by VAMP. So at some point it's faster and indicate better. Okay. So I think this is very interesting that we can go on the realm of structured data and real application. Let's see how much we can do on this. There will be more on structured data, and I think Marc Mézard will discuss data coming out of a multi-layer model later on, maybe tomorrow. All right, let's move then to something even more complicated, okay? Which is a generalized linear model, and now we are going to the problem of learning. So for instance, you have a picture of dogs and cats, and you want an algorithm to tell you this is a dog, this is a cat, right? So unless you have been frozen and you're still living in the 80s, you know that there is a revolution going on here. But if we go back to the 80s, because that was such a cool time, physicists are working a lot on this problem. So there is a seminal work by Derrida and Gardner on the teacher-student perceptron. What they say is, well, I start by a line, then I generate points such that at the right they are +1 and the left they are -1. I'm giving you the point. Can you find back the line? Can you learn the rule? It's called the teacher-student perceptron. And if you try to formalize what it is, this is really like there is x star that contains the coordinate of your line. Now, all these points, they are random coordinate of a random matrix F. And then you observe the labels, which are y equals sign of F. So it's really similar to what we had before, except of the sign. And the way you change things from linear regression is to go to this problem called generalized linear models, in which instead of observing fx plus noise, well, you observe a function of fx, okay, where the function is pointwise. Now, written like this, it's a much more general setting, all right? So, of course, it contains compressed sensing, but also a lot of other problems like superposition codes, phase retrieval, and teacher-student perceptron. So now we'll spare you the story because you should not be surprised what we have done. So we actually proved that the replica formula is correct for this. This is how it looks. The free energy is the sum of two free energies that looks like this, and the coupling terms. And now the trick is again to realize that these two terms correspond again to sample problem. And you can guess how we did. We interpolate from these two problems to the final one. Okay? Now, what is interesting is that in this problem, not only we prove the replica prediction is correct, we also prove that the optimal error is given by the minimizer, as before, but we also prove what the generalization error is. And the generalization error is what you want. The generalization error is telling you, look, if I give you that many number of examples, and I'm telling you their label, and now I'm giving you a new one, and I ask you to predict what is the label. Okay? And so the average error you are making is called the generalization error. And this is what we really want to know. And we prove that the replica prediction is correct. Okay, so for instance, let's look at an example. If you have a binary perceptron, that means your weights, okay, the point coordinate of your line are plus or minus ones. Okay? Now I'm giving you more and more examples. This is a number of examples I'm giving you. This is what the generalization error looks. If you have 0 example, it's 1. Okay, basically it's the same as a random guess. Then, as long as I'm giving you more and more examples, it decays. And then at 1.249, so that means the number of examples is 1.249 times the dimension of your data, it drops to 0 and you have a perfect learning. Okay? That was actually predicted by Georgi in 90. And so we proved it, and that's nice because we took time to prove this result, and it's all thanks to the interpolation method, which again that shows the influence of the Roman school on the field, I believe. Now what's interesting is that you have this branch here, which is dotted in the paper, and Georgi said something like, well, this is an unphysical branch. Okay. Now you will see a comeback of this. Okay, let's try to solve it in practice. How do we do this? Well, we write tap equation. Who has done it? Well, actually, Mark did it already in '89, right? So there is this nice paper where Mark derived all the Gardner result with the cavity method, and you can see here that he wrote here the tap equation are also derived. These are the tap equations. In fact, you can see that the notation are very close to the one I used today. There were good equations, but again, they did not work. So you have to tweak with the right ordering to make them work. And this has been done. In fact, it's been done by Sandeep Rangan, who wrote this fantastic paper called Generalized Approximate Message Passing. So it looks a bit like before, except now it can work on any of these problems. Okay? Any of these problems where you have an output which is not linear, but a function. Again, we have a rigorous state evolution for this, which is again due to Sandeep, and later there was some missing parts that were added by Andrea. And again, it's not so surprising, but if you look what you are doing here, this equation, if you look at what the overlap between your estimate and the truth is doing at each time, it follows this equation, and these two functions are nothing but what were in the replica free entropy. So again, these equations are trying to minimize or maximize, if you put a minus sign, the replica prediction. Okay? So, what happens if we run this for the perceptron? So it's interesting because people have tried to use tap equation for 20 years on the perceptron and they failed. Okay, in fact, I remember that Ricardo were using BP because he could not make a tap converge. Now this, this t-1 make it works, provably. Mathematics is sometimes useful. Now this is what happens if you run them. This is actually the result of an algorithm. And you see that I have this curve. Now you see here that in this region, I'm not following the equilibrium curve. And I'm out of equilibrium and the equation, tap doesn't work. But this is nothing but this region, okay? This is again because there is a minima that appear and tap gets trapped. So it's the hard phase once over again. And we have the redemption of the unphysical branch predicted by Georgi. But now that we can do this for any function, we can make more complicated rules. So for instance, this is what happened for the sign of absolute value, symmetric door. Okay, you have a transition here. This is what you predict for AMP, and this is the result of simulation. It's perfect again. This region is hard. As far as we know, nothing can work here. You can do it with phase retrieval or signless compressed sensing. And you can write a phase diagram with the number of measurements and the density of zeros. In fact, it's actually a very hard problem. As far as we know, even if the problem is very sparse, this region here is terrible. It's so terrible that in this lower corner, we believe that it's actually no polynomial algorithm will perform better than random. Okay, it's a very strong conjecture, but I believe it, and let's see what we can do with computer science people. And you can go to even more complicated rule. Okay? For instance, you can study a multi-layer model. For instance, the one that we like is a committee machine. So this is a paper that we wrote 2 months ago and that was accepted in NIPS, in which we repeated the whole analysis for the learning of the weights in a many-layer network. And again, that was the rule that we tried to learn. It's a 2-layer problem. It's called the committee problem. And we have the best generalization error. Apparently here you have a first-order transition to perfect realization, but reality is that you have a huge hard phase. In fact, the alpha, the value, the number of examples that you should need should scale like the number of hidden neurons, information theoretically. The algorithm seems to need k-square. Okay, so there is a very large region which is hard. And I think it's the first instance of this hard phase into a layer network. So I'm almost out of time. I wanted to show a last thing, which is a low-rank factorization problem. So we have just 1-2 slides, just because maybe you can get bored after these linear problems. So here, what I'm actually discussing is the thesis of Thibault Le Sueur, who is here, and he's a postdoc in Rome now. And the kind of problem that you have is that you have a matrix, n times r, where r is O1, so r can be even 1, so think of it as a vector if you want. You take x transpose, and then you add some noise. Okay, so you are given a low-rank matrix. You can play the same game with tensors, and you can try to come back to x. Okay? All right, I will spare you the detail. You can work, and you can write AMP. You can try to prove it. There have been a lot of work here on this. You can try to prove the replica, and so on and so forth. I just wanted to show you the application for one case, which is a mixture of Gaussian case. Right? Think about the following problem. So you have some matrix that tell you the center of 4, well, here there are 5, but think about 4 points in large dimension. Okay? Now you multiply it by another matrix, which is 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, and so on and so forth. So when you do this, you will have a billion of points which are all in 4 positions. And now you add Gaussian noise. And this is what you have. Okay? So for the first category, you will have those clouds and so on and so forth. Now I'm removing the label. I'm giving you this, and I ask you, can you go back to the original color? Okay, this is a clustering problem. So we tried to use AMP to do this, and the trouble is message passing algorithms are not really scalable because we need to store this huge matrix. And sometimes this matrix is huge. We live in big data area. That was the kind of thing that we had at the time. And I was using Julia. Okay, so one of the things that we did was to try to process, like people do in deep learning, data by mini batch. And we found the optimal way to do this, in which you try first to optimize, to solve the problem using only those points, then you move to those points, then you move to void points again, and so on. And processing data by mini-batch allows to scale. And I want to advertise some very nice result. For instance, this is what happens if you are given this thing, and you try to cluster them into different. Okay? Of course, for you, it's easy. Well, these are the 0, the 1, the 2. The computer doesn't know this. And this is a comparison between our algorithm, the blue one, and the state of the art, which is called mini-batch k-means. And we see that we have better result and comparable time. And if you don't like this digit data, this is the same with the 20 news group data set, which is a much more complicated data set. It's actually 20,000 documents on 20 different topics. You give him to your computer and you ask it to divide it, okay, in different topics, and actually we have a better result than mini-batch k-means. So I think it's nice that, maybe now we are moving to real application on this. So let's see what the future gives. So all right, I'm almost out of time. I will conclude. So try to give you a tour of a slightly biased tour on what we did in random inference problem. So we had now rigorous proof of the replica formula, which is very nice. We have much more powerful algorithm than we used to have. And we have this nice conjecture that there is this hard phase, and that maybe no algorithm can enter here, and this is a very open question. There is certainly more work to do. We would like to have algorithm that we can prove works always, right? And that's hard. Someone who uses algorithm, he doesn't care that it converges most of the time. Doesn't want to care. He wants the algorithm to converge all the time. Maybe to bad thing, but it should converge. And we don't have this. I discussed only Bayesian problem. Actually, what you really want to do is to go out of this Bayesian formalism. Then you lose the Nishimori property and you have replica symmetry breaking. And of course, one of the important questions is a hard phase really hard or not? Okay, and now I will stop and a list of reference. And I thank you all for your attention. And again, Giorgio, happy birthday.
Thank you, Florent. And now the paper is up for questions. Nicolas.
I would like to mention a paper which is probably the first paper which is behind many of the developments.
Yours.
The developments you mentioned. And this is the paper by Nishimori and the chairman of the session, Nishimori and Sherrington. And because they showed that in the Nishimori line, there is no replica symmetry breaking. So the formula, the replica formula is exact. And I think many...
Wait, I stopped you here. Showing that there is no replica symmetry breaking is one thing. Deducing that the replica symmetric formula is exact is still a lot of work at this point. But yes, that was very influential. What is very interesting is that the way these things were done at the time was by a very ingenious scheme, which is to use the invariance of the gauge transformation and summing of the whole gauge. And interestingly, there is another derivation which is base formula, which is 4-line. And it's very interesting that these things were discovered in different things. But yes, I know this paper, and it was indeed extremely influential. And if I start to...
Thank you. And were there any other questions? In that case, yes.
Is that the Nishimori point corresponds to the marginal probability. That's why.
Yes.
Okay, nice talk. I would have two questions, and I guess they're related, so I will ask both of them. The first one is related to this average entropy or free entropy, how do you call it? And you do also use information rate. How do we know that the quantities, these limits exist?
We proved it.
Yeah, but under what assumptions? I guess that
the assumption I gave.
Yeah, I guess that the basic assumption is this IID noise. but we usually...
Yes, if you want, yes.
Yeah, but data is usually correlated.
That's true.
Are there some efforts in models which can be suitable for correlated
Yes,
data?
Yeah, but it's much harder. By the way, my data are the matrix, and I showed you a correlated matrix at some point. So it's not true that the matrix itself is all IID. The noise was always IID, that's true.
Yeah, noise.
Yes?
But is there any work about correlated noise beyond Gaussian IID
Sure,
assumption?
it's harder to prove things, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Flora. I think we should move on to the next talk.